Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. I'm super excited to share this one with you today because today's journal with me is a very special one. It's in collaboration with Meg from megjournals for the Junk Journal July Challenge. For those of you who haven't heard of what that is before, Meg hosts 2 junk journaling challenges a year, in January and July respectively, which are month-long creative journaling challenges that have daily prompts that you can work on. Part of the fun with this particular challenge is that Meg sets it up so that for every new prompt, so for every daily prompt, there's also a video that goes out by her and also a different creator, and they go live on the day of the prompt. So you can find inspiration and see how other artists and journalers are interpreting the prompt and journal along with them. And so it makes it so that it's a really nice community project, everyone working on their prompts and seeing how they interpret them. So today's prompt for day 27 is poetic, and that's the one that I am assigned to. And so I'm tasked with representing that prompt and showing you how I've decided to interpret it. Quick note, since this is day 27, I'm thinking that probably like a lot of you have already participated in the challenge maybe, but if you're just hearing about it now, that's okay too. Even though it is a daily challenge being held in July, that doesn't really mean that you can't continue on after the fact or use the prompts in different ways. In fact, I do have another video that I posted earlier in the month, or maybe maybe towards the end of last month. Anyways, there's a video I posted previous to this one where I discuss what my plans are for the challenge and give a few ideas of how you can use them if you're not a junk journaler. So feel free to check that out if you're interested. Throughout this video, you'll see me setting up my junk journal, I want to say like adjacent spread, and how I've decided to interpret today's prompt so that you can understand a little better what my thought process is. But yeah, I wanted to also, throughout the video, talk to you about a few other ways that you could interpret this prompt or any other prompt, particularly if you aren't a junk journaler, because I know that a lot of my viewers aren't, or if you just don't junk journal in this way. Additional to that, at the end of the video, I do have a section where I share some poems. If you're kind of stuck and don't know what to pick, you maybe don't have a poem that's resonating, maybe one of the ones that I suggest or talk to you about, some of my favorites can resonate. So do check that out at the end of the video if that's something that you're interested. But let's go ahead and talk about my junk journaling process and kind of like what I'm doing and what I've been doing for the month if you've just arrived here today for the first time during Junk Journal July. So I say junk journal adjacent because I'm not actually working in a journal throughout the month. I'm working on blank pieces of paper, just some paper that I cut up, some cardstock. And then at the end of the month, it's going to be twofold. If I was just doing the challenge, then I would just bind that together. But I'm actually going to be scanning all of the images and I'm going to be working on them digitally. And there'll be other videos surrounding that because I'm going to be making a zine out of it. So that's the intention. But for the month, for the challenge, I'm going to be working in blank spreads, just cut up pieces of paper. So there's no actual journal yet. And that's why I'm saying it's junk journal adjacent. I'm also using my prompt as a theme that informs all of the other prompts I've worked on during the month. So I'm writing a haiku every day, which is a type of poem based on the prompt for the day. But today's prompt is the word poetic. So I wanted to think a bit more like outside of the box with it. And I decided to use a haiku that I had already written from when I was doing like my daily haiku practice earlier in the year, using them to document my day in a few words. So that's what I was doing right in the beginning is I was going through my little haiku notebook where I have all of my written haikus and deciding on which one I wanted. And I decided that I really liked one that said, "Days fading to night, grasping at the narrative, we seek permanence." So days fading to night, grasping at the narrative, we seek permanence. And I really liked that one. In terms of how I'm interpreting the actual like visual spread, something that I mentioned in that setup video is that for me, my response to the prompt is the haiku. first and foremost. And then the visual spread can either be just what I'm feeling, what's calling to me that day, or it can kind of call back to the haiku that I wrote. In this case, it was a little bit of both. If you notice, I have an image of a woman kind of like reaching up, and I was very called to that one because in the haiku I wrote grasping at the narrative, and so I really liked that idea of her reaching out. But I was really called to this image, the magazine that I have that I'm working on. I'm working actually on 2 spreads at once, so that's another little tip there. Work non-linearly. If something is calling you, if you have extra scraps, work on 2 at once. It doesn't have to be that you do 1 spread per page, or I'm sorry, not 1 spread per page, but 1 spread a day. You can kind of like work non-linearly, and that's actually a way that I tend to work as well, just to make sure that my juices, my creative juices, are always flowing. But I was really called to this like magazine clipping, and what I ended up doing, actually, because I didn't want to cut up the original clipping because I like what's behind it, I photocopied it on Midori paper. I also really wanted to have it on Midori paper because if I wanted to use a fountain pen or an inky pen, it wouldn't bleed, and that's something that I keep thinking about lately. So I ended up photocopying a few magazine clippings, and I really like it because I'm using a Midori paper pad that has grids, and I really, really like it. So that's kind of like what my thought process is right now. I'm kind of just looking amongst my paper scraps that I've kind of compiled and seeing what calls to me in the moment and just letting the creative juices flow. For me, this challenge really is just about kind of like thinking outside the box, being quick, and just seeing what calls to me, right? And letting it flow that way. When we think of poetic or look it up in the dictionary, something that comes up is this idea of expressing things or emotions in a sensitive way or a moving way. And I'm going to say something that might seem very oxymoronic, but I really do mean it. Mundanity can be poetic. Your day-to-day can be made poetic. Your life can be poetic, and you can document it as such. I kind of use the journaling workbook that Meg and Get Messy provides, and there's a question on there that says like something along the lines of what comes up for you when you think about the prompt. And that's kind of like what came up for me is mundanity can be poetic. Your day-to-day can be made poetic. And as I kind of kept thinking about it, I kept thinking of like, have you ever read a diary from a writer that's long gone or read some of their letters? They were mundane things in the day-to-day life, but to us, detached from the time period and the life in question, we find them poetic. We find those letters or those diaries poetic. So even if you just like to journal normally, right? Let's say you journal a day per page. One way that you can interpret this prompt is to try and make that journaling for the day feel more romantic, more poetic. The cliche, fall in love with your life. It's so true. Try to tap into the beauty of your life, even if it's difficult. And two, also, don't be afraid to acknowledge that difficulty if processing it is what makes more sense to you. Because with poetry, it's very often that with poetry you delve into darker themes. So if that's something that you're not necessarily against, because I know a lot of people don't like journaling about like negative stuff, and that's totally fine. But if you do, that's something that you can kind of delve into, right? So if you're not a junk journaler, but you do journal every day, that's one way that you can interpret the prompt, right? Just trying to describe your day in a more poetic way. So that's a very quick tip for you if you want to participate but don't necessarily want to create a junk journal spread. And kind of like in that same vein, right? You can use the prompts as intentions. Maybe you don't want to physically participate in the challenge, but you can pick a few words from the prompts, like maybe not every single one, but pick a few words and use them to inform your day. So, kind of like bringing that one little word for the year energy, but into the month. So, there are prompts like observe, spark, poetic, like today's, ephemeral, free, shine, celebrate, contrast. Pick a few that you like and set an intention for the day based on them. So that's one way that you can do it, right? If you don't want to actually participate in a physical way, you can use them to set intentions for your day. And I think that's a really like meta way of using the prompts. It's a little out there and it's very different from what the original intention of the challenge is, but it's just to express to you that there are no rules. You can use these in whatever way feels good for you. You can use them as journal prompts if you enjoy that. Maybe like you see the prompt homemade, right? And want to write about a recipe you're into, or see the word scraps and want to spend the day making a scrappy quilt. Maybe you're an illustrator. You can use the prompts as daily sketch prompts instead of journaling prompts, right? Like let them be suggestions to inform whatever your creative practice already looks like. And that's a way that you can participate even if you aren't a junk journaler. Anyone can participate in this challenge in which way. Again, it's just a way for you to grow with your creative practice. That's at least that's how I am interpreting it. That's how I like to kind of like that's the energy I bring to any challenge, really. That's how I like to interpret them. Another way I really thought of and actually really like and might do for some other days is to use them for common placing. I know a lot of you keep common placing books one way or another. So another way that I thought you could interpret the prompts was to use them to spark research, right? So like for Poetic, I went and I collected all of my poetry books and went looking through them, looking for my favorites. And like I mentioned earlier, I will be going through some of those favorites later on in the video. So check it out if that's something that you're interested. I wanted to share some of them with you in case you were looking for a poem but didn't really know where to start. So if you don't like any of the ones that I share, or you're not a writer and don't want to write one yourself, you can always look up poems online or use a favorite one that you like. So welcome to my tabletop. As promised, I wanted to give you some examples of some of my favorite poems from some of my poetry books. So I do collect some poetry books, and I was going through them and just trying to figure out or trying to look at some that I liked remind myself of some that I've enjoyed. If you look at the side, you see that they're pretty tabbed up, and I do have a lot of favorites in these, but I just wanted to share you one from each. They all have kind of like different vibes. A few of them are from disabled and POC authors, and some of them deal with, you know, shifting identities. Some of them deal with grief. Some of them deal with being in the diaspora. They're all very, very good. I wanted to show you a zoomed up version of these spines so that you could see the authors and the name of them in case you were interested in any of them. Some of them you might know, some of them you might not. Like, for example, a lot of you might know Mary Oliver, but a lot of these other ones are from less known poets. And yeah, I really like them. I have other poetry books, but I just wanted to share some from these specifically. So starting off, I wanted to share from Mary Oliver, my fave. A lot of you know that I love Mary Oliver. In Junk Journal January, I used um her Wild Geese poem in one of my spreads. So I wanted to show you this one because I really like it. I think I marked two. Yeah. So, and you must not ever give anyone else the responsibility for your life. I did not give to anyone the responsibility for my life. It is mine. I made it, and I can do what I want to with it. Live it. Give it back someday without bitterness to the wild and weedy dunes. I really like that one. Another fave of mine is The Power of Time, but that's a whole essay. These are more essays, not just necessarily poetry books, but there's certain lines of it that I really love and really resonate. So you don't even have to look for poetry specifically. You can go into some of your favorite books and just pick up lines that make you feel something. At the end of the day, poetry is things that make you feel something. And so you can use lines from books that you want as well as a quote if you would rather do that and you're not into poetry specifically. The one I wanted to show you here was just a one-liner. Let me always be who I am and then some. So maybe that's something that sparks an idea in you. You can use that for either commonplacing or for your poetry, your quote that you use for the day. Lazarus Rises is about grief. I'm not gonna get into specifics of this poetry book because it does deal with grief and other triggering topics. So if you are interested in something related to that, do check out Berkeley's poetry collection. This is self-published. Kayo Shingonyi, there's one I think in here that I marked to share with you. Here, this one also deals with heavy topics. A lot of these do deal with heavy topics, so do check trigger warnings before checking in with any of them, but they're just some of the poetry books I have to share with you. So this one is from a poem called Interior with Ceiling Fan. Let me be this unguarded always, speaking without the need of words, because breath is the oldest language any of us know. And I don't really believe in when you're reading poetry to disconnect it from other parts of the poem. But when it comes to quotes and when it comes to this, it doesn't need to be anything more than you want it to be. So if it's fragmented, that's, that's fine. Just use whatever resonates to you, right? So that's another one. This one is from the Perseverance. And for this one, I'm gonna leave this one last because I don't have a poem in here that I want to show you. I'd want to show you something from the back, which is an excerpt of an interview that the author had. So let me put this one in the back. This one is called In the Field Between Us, and it is by two disabled authors. This one deals a lot with like chronic pain and chronic physical ailments. I really, really, really love this poetry collection. If you are someone that deals with chronic illness, I definitely recommend it, especially if you've been dealing with chronic illness for most of your life, if not all of it. They end up making like poems that are in response to each other. So this poem, Dear S, is in response to this Dear M poem. Again, really recommend that you read it. If you would like to pause and read it, go ahead and do that. But I'm going to read you the one that I marked, which is this one. Dear S, if the trees know birth is just another word for loss, that there's a cost to shifting from seed to sapling, all the shards of what you were that don't outlast the passage into light, the way the weather breaks across your back just when you learn its shape, splits and scars the wood, how, if you listen in one direction, there's a whole side of the forest you'll never see. Then God, I love that they do it anyway. Become themselves and stand there each spring as it batters them to blooming, asks, what would you weather just to call yourself alive? love this poem. So definitely check their poetry collection out if you are interested. Next up is Anodyne. I don't think I actually marked any in here. I like a lot of them. So I didn't mark any in here, but do recommend checking out anything by Khadija Queen. Very amazing poet, very dynamic. Honorifics has some of my favorite poems. This one I believe was released. A lot of them were released during the pandemic. So there's a lot of feelings of like isolation and stuff in a lot of them. This one specifically called Proxima B. It is a 2-page poem. It is one of my favorite poems. I'm actually thinking I will not read it now, even though I really wanted to. I think I'll make a separate like commonplacing video because I do want to spend some time with this poem in my commonplace. I love it so much. Again, it's Proxima B by Cynthia Miller in her Honorifics poetry collection. It's honestly so good. I love it so much. So do check out this one if you'd like. And then The Perseverance. So I wanted to end with this because it is about poetry and life. And I think that it's nice final words. So this is the one thing that poetry has done for me. It's helped me to feel, in spite of all adversity, that it is possible to express every part of myself and be received, understood without having to play up one part of my identity over another. So I wanted to focus here. This is one thing that poetry has done for me. It has helped me to feel, in spite of all adversity, that it is possible to express every part of myself and be received. That's the power of poetry. That's the power of living a life that feels more in tune, that feels more poetic. I think that at the end of the day, even if you don't consider yourself a poet, even if you don't like poetry, even if nothing else that I've said to you in this video resonates, live a life that is more creative and more authentic to yourself. Living a life that is more creative, that is more authentic to yourself, living a life that gives you peace is in itself poetic. That might sound flourishy to you, but I really do believe that there's beauty in mundanity, that there is value in the day-to-day that is perhaps ordinary to other people. Who decides what is extraordinary or ordinary, and who decides that one is better than the other? And so that I wanted to finish with this. I try to root the language of my poetry in kindness, forgiveness, compassion, and curiosity. That is the way I want to live, but of course, that's not to say anger and resentment and envy and other difficult emotions don't make noise in my work. So I know a lot of people don't like journaling negative thoughts. They don't like the idea of processing them. They don't like writing them down because they will like dwell on them for too long. And of course, everyone is different. And if that is you, then, do what is in alignment with you. But I will say, let's say you get to a specific prompt and you're using it for journaling or whatever, and negative emotions come up and you end up feeling that your spread is too negative, throw it out, rip it off, burn it. You don't necessarily have to keep it. Just because you are working on these spreads doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be permanent. They can just be a way for you to process the day, and then you chuck it. You don't have to be as sentimental as I am and wanting to like keep every single thing as a like timestamp of your life. You don't have to do that. If something is not giving you joy and something is not of value to you, if you don't end up even liking the spread, let's say it's not even negative, let's say you just don't like it, chuck it. There's nothing keeping you from throwing it out, from crossing it out, from painting over it. So don't take the prompts so seriously that it stops you from having fun, from enjoying the creative practice, from just expressing yourself in whatever way feels more creative to you. And yeah, those are my 2 cents. I hope that you enjoyed the video, that you enjoyed some of these poems that I shared or some of the poetry collections. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.